Welcome to the third webinar on the Fee to Trust process. Today we'll be covering acceptance and conveyance and scenarios and solutions. Today's presentation will have a fair amount of audience participation and engagement. So as we start on the presentation here in a few moments after some rules and announcements, I request that you either raise your hand to contribute, or you could put your comments in the chat feature. Either one would work just fine. Excuse me. So a couple of pieces here. Our presenters, you know them by now. You've seen them at the conferences, you've seen them on these webinars, you've seen them on Talk Shop, and probably any number of other recordings that we've been able to do the past several years. Andrew Orosco Jr., Brenda Tomaras, Karen Woodard are here to talk to you today about the Fee to Trust process. We have other NTLA board members as well who are part of the discussion and will probably have comments here and there. So we'll definitely look forward to some of their commentary. Couple of rules. I've already went over the two big ones. If you have anything to say, whether it's a comment or a question, use the chat feature or raise your hand. And you could raise your hand by going down to reactions and clicking raise hand. And it'll tell me that you've raised your hand, and I'll be able to unmute you at that time, especially when our presenters have called on you. So, hang tight. I'll be right with you if you have your hand up. So we do appreciate that participation ahead of time. This is recorded, and this will be on Vimeo probably yet this week. So if you can't attend the entire session, or should you have some challenges to your viewing experience today, fear not, it will be available to you afterwards. In addition to an evaluation survey that will better inform the programs that we continue to build for you in this format, including some topics of interest that you'd like to see covered in the future. If you do submit ideas, I do request that you be as specific as you can in those ideas, because sometimes these areas are just so big and we want these programs to focus on what you really want to see. A couple of announcements. After I'm done here, I'm going to, in chat, submit the link for the talk shop on Fee to Trust that happens on November 2nd, noon Central. This will be the third in our pilot series for the talk shop. After that, we're going to do some evaluation to see how to go about reframing the program and hopefully better meeting your needs. So please do participate and register ahead of time. This is specifically for land staff and land professionals to network, to ask questions, and to just have a really meaningful time in exploring very specific topics. So that'll be here in the chat in a moment. And then the second announcement I have is that the Indian Land Tenure Foundation a few years ago purchased some ground penetrating radar equipment. Well, it's now been received again from on loan with another tribe. If you or someone you know would like to talk about using that equipment, hit me up. My email will be in the chat here in just a moment as well. Send me an email, we'll schedule time to talk about the purpose of the GPR unit or how you could use it or just how do you get it. So let me know.
Can we use it for like treasure hunting?
You could take it to a beach and see what happens. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to Andrew Orosco Jr., who will now begin our presentation. Andrew.
Great, thank you for that, Nick. As Nick stated, my name is Andrew Orosco Jr. I'm the chair of the National Tribal Land Association. I also serve as the planning director for the San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians here in Southern California. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you all here today for the third iteration of our Fee to Trust webinar. It's good to see some familiar faces and names out there. So again, thanks for joining us today. I think we've had great turnout and success in some of the dialogue that we've had over the past two webinars. And so I'm looking forward to finishing off strong and seeing where we're going to head next with Feed a Trust specifically. I think this is a big topic and has been for quite some time, but there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of changes that are happening in Indian country that are going to allow tribes to, expand their land base. So it's a good thing. So again, thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to hearing your perspectives and some of the issues that you may be dealing with. So I think that's a key component of this webinar is, we obviously are presenting and kind of getting the momentum going, but your participation and your perspective is equally or more important. I've learned a few things in my time on these webinars. So looking forward to this third one. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Ms. Tomaras.
Good morning, Brenda Tomaras. I'm on the board of NTLA and an attorney out here in California working with tribes on Feed a Trust issues. Really enjoy doing Feed a Trust. It's actually one of my favorite things to do with regard to my job, but sometimes it gets to be a little tough when it comes to either the opposition by a lot of people out here on the West Coast to tribes getting any land. And then also things we'll talk about on the webinar today, title issues, how do you circumvent some things that BIA absolutely says no way. I guess, my board colleague Sarah always says, I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Please do not take anything I say today as legal advice. And with that, I will pass it off to Karen.
Thank you, Brenda. All right, good morning, everybody. Karen Woodard. I'm the Realty Administrator for the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, Southern California tribe. I'm also an NTLA board member, was in the very beginning of creating the National Tribal Land Association. And I can tell you, I'm really, really thrilled about the things that are happening with our organization. We're really doing some positive stuff. So welcome everybody, and we can get just started on our webinar this morning. Shall I share my screen? Okay, I'm gonna go here, share. So today again is the Feed a Trust. We're going to talk about scenario solutions, acceptance and conveyance. You all know who's presenting today. So one of our first ones here is a scenario. So we decided to kind of pick something that maybe, everybody could kind of relate to. So it's a simple, the tribe purchased an abandoned 300-acre cattle ranch in Nevada along Interstate 40. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with the interstate. Purpose was consolidation and future economic development. The tribe assumes the property is contiguous to the tribal reservation. However, it's separated by a county drainage easement. So the question for everybody, is this a contiguous parcel? And I'd like everybody to participate. This is going to be a real participation today. We're going to have everybody raise your hand or put stuff in the chat. And all I want is a simple yes or no.
Yep. So it looks like we've got overwhelming yeses so far.
Great. You would all be correct, even though it is a drainage easement and it may not be a public use right of way as far as a road or some other access easement. It is considered a contiguous parcel. Okay. So after they bought the cattle ranch, they found out that it was also used for a storage facility for motorhomes and buses. So a phase 1 environmental will also be needed. What could go wrong with the phase 1? And here we're going to have you guys all put in some suggestions here. What are those environmental risks? And then I'm going to put them in here as we go. Sorry.
We have one, Karen, contaminated soils.
Can't spell this morning. Can't spell.
Okay. Gas leakage and oil leaks, so I would probably consider that contaminated soils.
Mhm.
Tires or debris have to be removed. We have contamination from the vehicles. Asbestos.
Good one.
Underground storage tanks. Extensive cleanup, trash, might be garbage on other side where we can't see, radioactive material. 50-gallon drums, water pollution, hazardous bio waste, habitat disturbance. Okay, so
That's a good handful to start our discussion.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add in, and I absolutely know nothing about cattle ranching, but in case there is some sort of substance that they would use to, I don't know, clean up after the cows or in their feed or something that might be considered to be toxic, you'd need to look for that as well.
I'll do possible toxic waste. All right. So on our next slide here, we're going to talk about how can these environmental risks be mitigated. We want to get some discussion in here on that.
okay. So number
Feel free-
one was
I'm sorry.
contaminated soils.
Yeah.
We've got systematic soil sampling. We have contaminated soils. You should test soil to see how far seep down and lay mitigation materials if it has not.
I think soil sampling, that would cover the soil sampling, right?
Yeah.
Because we're going to find out how.
Environmental assessment.
Yeah, it's definitely going to require an environmental assessment.
Got animal vectors.
That's spelled right.
Yes. We've got tribal department remove all easy accessible trash and debris before phase 1 is initiated.
Okay. That would include like salvaging the vehicles, the.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the excavation of soils, once you do the soil sampling, if you find that there is materials or something there, then typically excavating the soils and getting rid of them is one of the ways to mitigate.
Yeah. And so we've got, let's see, Fonzie question mark.
Well, so that comes in. So right now we're looking at the hazardous materials assessment, which is part of NEPA, but the Fonzie, I saw cultural resources, that stuff. So NEPA and NHPA are done on a separate kind of tract. And all of that would be addressed either by the tribe's environmental department or, out in California, we typically hire consultants and they do all of the studies. They do the cultural study, they do a bio study, they do traffic studies if you're planning on development, that kind of thing that has to then be evaluated by BIA for the NEPA requirement.
So, you know, I have a comment from Scott Mitzner. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. Environmental risk, assume liability for existing conditions, duty to inspect before purchase. So that definitely touches on the last two sessions that we've had in terms of your due diligence when you're purchasing the property, is trying to get an understanding of what you're getting into. And I think this is a perfect example of that.
Right. Yeah, test wells to determine water. So yeah, so soil sampling, water sampling, you know,
Mhm.
if the water is contaminated, that's a little more
Yeah, that's a,
difficult to deal with than just excavating, you know, a bunch of soils. So that may be something that, you know, BIA balks at, and you'd have to see, you know, what possible solutions there are for that one.
right. Yeah, it could be difficult. Tribal water department could be involved.
Yep.
And the environmental department, if you do environmental or if you do water sampling, all that.
And I see another comment from Mr. Mitzner, and Karen or Brenda, I don't know if you can elaborate, but it says duty of seller to restore soil.
Yeah, so that would come within your purchase and sale, you know, of the property. If you find out beforehand that it's contaminated and both parties are motivated enough for the sale, in other words, they really want to sell it to you enough and you really want to buy it enough that you can negotiate something so that the seller is the one that would remediate the soil.
Gotcha.
So you want to do your due diligence before, and you do, in your purchase agreement, you should always ask for a, 90-day period. I mean, I know some sellers don't want to hear 90-day or, plus escrows, but if you're like Morongo, our membership has to approve that sale or that purchase anyway. So you have sufficient time to go out there and look at and walk the property and look at what is on that property and what you think is going to have to happen in order to bring it into trust. So you can always add that to your purchase agreement.
Right. It says, are we, from Patty Perry, are we assuming not in an FIP special flood hazard area?
It's a good scenario.
And definitely has impacts to development, right? So that's,
Mhm.
and that is that is disclosed in during the purchase for sure.
Right. Yeah, that would be one of the risks. And that would be a question, how would you mitigate if it is in a flood zone?
Yeah, well, that if it's in the flood zone, then that's gonna limit your uses for the property, depending on how much of the property is actually in the flood zone.
Yeah.
Right. Or increase your development costs significantly, right?
Right.
Any other suggestions on
Let's
mitigated?
see. Yeah, so we've got test well to determine water table contamination. So I think we touched on that.
Yeah, so this will be for you, Andrew. So Patty suggested an ALTA survey, and Ryan asked what an ALTA survey is.
Oh,
Okay, so an ALTA survey is a part of the ALTA insurance policy. It's a title insurance. And so the survey is conducted and identifies any encroachments along the boundary. It locates structures, roadways, recorded easements, along with potential open and notorious use pathways, things of that nature. So it's really a snapshot of the physical property in terms of any encumbrances, and gives the potential buyer a really good snapshot of what is on the property, what's limiting it, and gives you a really good idea for any of these types of issues that may come up. So an Alta survey would certainly help, especially for a large property where you're going to be doing some economic development, and would hopefully be done before the purchase.
Yeah, should always do your Alta if you can before the
Yeah.
purchase, so that you can determine if there's any encroachment issues that you're gonna have to deal with, or if there are any easements that might affect development of the property.
Yep.
Which we'll get into some of those issues as well. So I guess that we've kind of gone through all of our possible mitigation. And we
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, comments from Mr. Mitzner again. So the first one is, what is liability of tribe leaders for purchasing a hazmat site or brownfield?
Ooh,
Liability to who? To the tribal members, to federal government? I mean, first of all, the federal government isn't going to accept that land into trust unless there's a remediation agreement.
Right.
So if the tribal leaders purchased it without doing the due diligence, you know, they probably were doing it in the course of their positions. And so not to get too legally complex, but they probably can't be sued for it. The tribe just has to figure out what to do with bad land.
Thank you for that, Brenda. And so just a reminder, we're getting a lot of activity in the chat, which is great. If you do have a comment or would like to say something, just raise your hand. Nick will unmute you, and you could either respond or add to one of the answers that have been given. Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of people have been putting information on CERCLA, which is actually the statutory provisions for cleanup of hazardous.
I'm sorry,
sites.
Brenda, what was that called?
It's called CERCLA.
CERCLA. What does that mean?
Shoot, I don't know. I think Eric posted, let's see. Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
There you go. Okay. We have a raised hand.
That would be Nick, right? Nick deals with.
Raising the hand.
Okay, I think Miss Marchand, you're.
Yeah, hi. I had made the comment about CERCLA. So that's a federal law that creates liability for owners or operators of contaminated property. And during pre-purchase due diligence for tribes, I've seen where phase 1 assessments prior to purchase can resolve that and release the tribes from all liability when they're purchasing property that has potential contamination. So that's a good tool to use prior to purchase. So that's all I had to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I
Right.
mean, and that, I
Right.
think we've mentioned that before, but yeah, the phase one as part of your due diligence is definitely, an important tool because it does, prevent you from, ending up with a piece of property that has a brownfield on it or something that you weren't aware of. And so, being able to know that, and you're right, some environmental risks, as they call them, under the phase one can be addressed very easily. I mean, as long as you're not sitting on top of a former, nuclear power plant, or, there some places, there's a Santa Susana laboratories in California here up by Santa Barbara County where they built all the rockets. And so pretty much they're going to have to go down 10 feet to take care of all of the contaminated soils that are up there. So
Brenda, can you give me the initials for that law?
CERCLA, CERCLA. And Eric posted the link to it in the comments.
Okay.
Yeah, super fun.
Go ahead, Eric.
I just wanted to point out, was it the Reno Sparks Indian Colony in Nevada purchased a brownfield site, and they did do some mitigation on there, and they ended up building a Walmart on there.
Cool.
And in another scenario, the tribe was in a long-term negotiation to acquire timberlands in Washington. But the site was so contaminated that they ultimately ended up just taking an easement on the property instead of purchasing all of the the underlying fee. So that was one way that the tribe was still able to use a surface of the property, but the liability for all the cleanup and everything on the property was still with the original landowner.
So they purchased the easement, so just the surface?
Correct. Yeah, they just took the surface and they just had an easement to to build stuff.
Oh,
make
that's
improvements
interesting.
on it. But
Yeah, that's really creative thinking.
is
Eric.
very,
I
really
like
creative.
those
Mhm.
ideas.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Eric. Good to
Yes,
see
thank
you.
yeah, you too.
Very
Okay, and
creative.
so Teresa says, basically the innocent landowner defense under CERCLA, and thinking about entering into a prospective purchaser agreement. So those are all good points, for when you're negotiating and getting ready to purchase the property.
And as we've said many, many times, do your due diligence before you purchase the property,
Yeah.
so you know what you're getting into. Yeah.
I have a quick question. This is for Nick. Does the chat transcript come with the recording? I believe it does, correct?
Yeah, I could find a good way to do that. I'm just I want to make sure I protect individual responses to that. So we'll make sure that you can get that transcript, Eric.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we've got some good mitigation measures there.
I think so. I think we could move
I
forward.
don't think we missed any. I think we missed anything here. Okay,
All right.
I think we can move on.
Okay, we'll move on. We're going to move on to some title exceptions. And please, I think we talked in our last webinar about some title issues, and in our last talk shop too, about title issues that were happening out there. So we just kind of threw these out here to see if any of these, which of these you thought would be a problem for title. But we would like to have the attendees, if you could, either email our NTLA group or Nick or even one of us. We'd like to expand more on title exceptions and issues that tribes are having, especially in our future webinars and our conference, our upcoming conference in March. So we threw some of these out here. We've found that on the property, there were major utilities such as a large electrical transmission line, several water easements, the county drainage easement. We also found that we have a riverbed and we have jurisdiction by the U.S. Army Corps. We have some issues with some access easements, developer agreement, and annexation by a local city. So we're asking the question here, which of these may be a problem for the BIA when it comes to exceptions on title? We're going to do some, I'm going to duplicate this. Do we think all of them are a problem? Say, see anything in the chat going there, guys? Okay. I guess we'll make some comments on our own here.
Sorry, I was on mute. So we've got annexation by local city, annexation, developer agreement if it has associated financial requirements, riverbed, USACE, annexation, water easements, county drainage, annexation and easements, depending on meaning of problem. Any of them may be an issue depending on the language in the individual agreements themselves, binding arbitration clauses, etc. Any easement that has financial implications that could pass on to the BIA. Yep. Easements, developer agreement. Here we have a question: which easements are good easements that service the property? Will BIA accept easements that can be insured?
There are easements out there that, yes, would be very useful for the tribe. You know, for instance, the electrical transmission line, it would be very useful if we're going to do a substation or if we need, you know, a lot of electricity and power for our future economic development. The water easements could possibly be useful as well. Because the easement there, you're gonna have to work with whoever that owner is of the easement, but that could also be a plus for the tribe if they need water for their project.
Right. I think, Karen, a big factor in that is the location of the easement too, right? If you have the transmission line running right through the smack dab middle of the property, that could be problematic, even though it's a good easement in and of itself.
Right. Yeah, you would have to look at, you know, is it in the location that the tribe would like for economic development? So, you know, this is where we get into master planning. This is where we get into, you know, specific planning. You know, does it, you know, is it usable? Can it be relocated? You know, all of those things have to be looked at when you get into your specific uses for that parcel.
Right, and there were a couple of comments about the Anti-Deficiency Act, which is, you know, every BIA employee knows it backwards and forwards, and that means that, you know, anything that has the potential for causing either liability, you know, causing some kind of liability on the federal government if they take the land into trust. So for instance, with the water agreements, I have a few, you know, out in the valley where they had water metering agreements where they, you know, absolutely had to pay X amount. And that had to be negotiated off before the United States would take it into trust, because they're not going to take the chance of being liable to the water district
Right.
for, payment of those monies or assessments.
So we're already getting into solutions. That's good. I like it.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, I like it. This is what this is about. We're supposed to be getting into, solutions and, exceptions and risks and all that fun stuff. So water agreements would be one way of resolving it. Is that what I got from you, Brenda?
Well, you got to negotiate with the district to,
Mhm.
Somehow do it. Sometimes BIA is, if you do a direct agreement with the district between the tribe and the district, and I'm gonna say the ugly words of they're probably gonna make you waive sovereign immunity, but as long as it's an enforceable agreement, then you can do that.
Right.
As one way.
Okay. We talked about easements.
So, yeah. There's, I think these first two are problems. So access agreements, if they're not recorded, developer agreement, if it encumbers the land, and then annexation into city may cause the BIA to require water and sewer agreements with the city. Let's see here. Conservation easements and sustained forestry initiatives that have tax consequences. So I think that was another
Yeah, and
issue.
the most of the time, the solicitors don't like to see language that says in perpetuity, regardless of whether
Mhm.
there's a money consequence to it or not. They just, the idea is that they're supposed to be taking land into trust for the benefit of the tribe. And if it's, conservation easement, I know a lot of times the solicitors have balked at that.
We've got another solution, resolution by tribal council acknowledging easements and that the tribe accepts responsibility of any financial requirements. And then we have amendments of historical easements, agreements to change problematic language or creation of easements where they do not otherwise exist, or existing infrastructure, etc.
Right. A lot of times, a lot of the title exceptions, take a lot of negotiation with the various parties and title companies once you've got it figured out.
And wouldn't you say some of those agreements have also maybe have expiration dates on them?
Yeah.
I know some developer agreements do, if they don't hit certain milestones or if they don't meet some conditions of whatever that entity that has jurisdiction over it, those types of agreements can expire.
Right. And the other thing is if they've got a developer agreement on there, most of the time what they're requiring is sort of the local jurisdiction requirements. So, water line, septic, whatever, which when the land goes into trust, at least currently our solicitor is going this way. I've seen it go differently, but a lot of times, since tribes don't have to comply with local, zoning and regulations, then it's not a problem. As long as they haven't really started and done a whole lot. If it's just a development agreement sitting on there with those kinds of requirements, our solicitor tends to not worry about that too much.
Yep.
Okay. We have another comment. Some state laws address development agreements where the parties have become insolvent and no longer operating. If a certain amount of time has passed, 20 to 30 years, then the title company can remove per the state law process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to know. Any other solutions out there?
I think that's it.
Well, we also came up with some solutions as well. Like we talked earlier, verifying the location of the electrical transmission line for development. Can it, via survey, can it be relocated? Is maybe the right of way has an expiration date, or maybe the tribe can use it for development purposes. Perhaps you can work with your county or local jurisdictions as far as special permits and tax generation. Agreements with your local city governments, county agreements, and of course, developer agreement we just talked about with expiration dates. So it looks like we're all doing very well on our applications. That's good to know. Okay.
So, I mean, we've got some time. Does anybody want to throw out a unique title exception that they've run into and talk about what they had to do to clear it out?
Yeah, let's see some hands raised up for some of that. Let's hear some of these stories.
Hi, my name is Riley Marchand. I'm a tribal attorney. I've worked for the Coeur d'Alene tribe in Idaho and then the Kalispel tribe in Washington state. And I'm currently an in-house attorney with the Tulalip tribes. And I've been doing fee to trust since 2015. And per the development agreement in Washington state, the state has a law on the books for addressing when those agreements are in place on title and the companies or developers are no longer operating. And I recently had to have one of those special exceptions removed last year when I was working for the Kalispel tribe. They were attempting to get some property into trust in Airway Heights adjacent to their casino, and it had a development plan associated with it. And the company that encumbered title had been insolvent for like 30 years. And so we pointed the title company to that Washington state law that addressed removing that when there is no longer an actual company in place. And they had no problem removing that from title. And then we reran the report and submitted it to Interior, and it was accepted into trust.
That's great. Yeah, sometimes a lot of states have, helpful laws that I think you guys, I mean, there's a couple other things you guys have as well in terms of fee to trust. Washington state does, and I'm trying to think of I don't remember. It has something to do with taxes, but I don't practice up there, so. But yeah, those kinds of things, are very helpful to have the state law that can assist you prior to the land going into trust.
Anyone else have some title issues? And
I do have.
How they worked around it?
I do have a couple of comments, questions here. So I think this is a solution. Provide road orders, leases, land assignments, etc. We have a question. Does BIA keep an index of all tribal land purchases?
I'm going to go with no, because they can barely keep track of the ones they have to keep track of.
Right. They pretty much do it on an Excel spreadsheet, at least in our region.
Yeah. And that's the fee to trust application. So
yeah, that's just the application. That's
just
not
any kind of land purchase. They're not going to know about, even if the tribe hasn't submitted for fee to trust or something.
right.
Right.
But
And then I think I had an answer.
I think the Census Bureau, though, does send out land status maps.
Yeah.
for us to update on a regular basis. I think almost annual, I think they send them out to tribal nations to
Yeah.
update the map.
Assuming that the tribe actually will do that.
Right. Mhm.
Okay, I've got a question. Are tribal land purchase agreements subject to FOIA?
Well, you shouldn't be submitting the purchase agreement with your feed of trust. I mean, if you submit it with the feed of trust, then it probably is subject to FOIA, but there's no reason to submit it. That's just, private to the tribe and the seller.
Okay, and looks like we've got comment. Looks like the Census Bureau just asked for our boundary and any exterior trust land, not exterior fee land annually.
Mhm.
Okay.
Hi there, this is Abby. I was just unmuted.
There we go.
Hi there.
Hi,
Sorry about
Abby.
that.
Hi, Abby. Go ahead. No
Yeah,
worries.
so I was curious. Recently we just had a title company that came back with some of our title commitments that were showing in title exception under the Schedule B2 for the Patch Act decision or any claim or allegation of Secretary of Interior violated authority or discretion to take land into trust under the Administrative Procedures Act is as actually a title exception on the commitment. Has anybody ever seen anything like that before, or have anything like that that they've seen from companies for trust applications?
So I'm going to apologize, Abby, because you were kind of breaking up a little bit. Was it?
What was the specific exception?
Yeah, so it says any claim or allegation that the Secretary of Interior violated any authority or discretion to take the land into trust under the Administrative Procedures Act, under the definition, or sorry, the meaning of the Patch Act decision. So, and I did just recently the title company has actually wanted to try to put these on any of our packages that we're going to be going into trust on for the title on the title commitment, and it doesn't seem to make sense to me as far as just understanding what a title exception actually means. But then also, I guess I'm not sure why that would be included under B2. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that before, but they're hearing that's being done across Indian country, and I just never heard this. So I'm curious if anyone else has.
Unusual. What title company is it?
Old Republic.
Old Republic. What area are you in?
We are in Minnesota.
Minnesota. Okay.
Yeah, so Abby, I've seen that on Fidelity. I've seen that on Old Republic and on First American. They're just trying to cover their butts from the Patch Act case, which basically, they're saying if the BIA takes the land into trust, illegally, so to speak, then they don't have any liability to the tribe or the United States.
Yeah, and we have a comment. We haven't had that specific exception, but we have seen similar and demanded that it be removed as discriminatory.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, like that too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've got so hopefully that answers your question, Abby. And
Perfect. Thank you.
we have another question. Can BIA remove federal or state tax liens?
No. That would be a liability to the BIA or to the federal government. You would have to, the tribe would have to remove that lien. Or the seller. So if you're purchasing the property, the title company should have sent you a title that showed what all those liens were on there, and the seller would have had to remove them.
Right. So Karen, what you're saying is ideally this is taken care of before, prior to
Before.
purchase, right?
Yeah. before it goes into-
And then if it isn't for some reason, maybe the buyer seller don't agree on moving forward, or the seller taking care of that, then this would not, Department of Interior would not bring this into trust until those liens were cleared.
Correct.
Okay, anybody else have any experience and would like to share with the group? Please raise your hand, or you could put it in the chat box. Okay,
All right, shall we move on to, we've met all the requirements? And what's next?
yeah.
Okay. All right, so we've met all the requirements. We're going to talk a little bit about what that process is, what the BA then has to do once we've met all those requirements. Of course, you're probably all familiar with the notice of application that has to be published. Our final NEPA has to be approved. And of course, the notice of application, once it's published, there's a public comment period. And then there's a response. We have to have, if there's comments, within the tribe has to respond to those comments. If there's no comments, then we can move on to the notice of decision. And then, of course, then that goes into our acceptance of conveyance if there's no appeals. I know and Brenda can probably talk on this too, is that I know for a lot of our San Diego County tribes, there are appeals for every notice of decision. Am I correct? Is it? Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say it actually spans California.
Oh, is it California now?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the area that the tribes are in.
Mhm. We're in Riverside County, and I don't recall too many. We've never had an appeal, and I don't think that we've had too many comments as far as our applications go. But I would imagine for overdeveloped areas, they probably don't appreciate it at all. And a lot of times the counties don't like the parcels being removed from their tax rolls. I know we've had to address those. If it's a large parcel and they're getting well over $500,000 in taxes, then generally there's comments about that from the county itself. And we've had to justify that, by the economic development that we do as far as jobs, the taxes we provide to the county, through retail sales tax and that. So there are ways to get, to respond to those comments. Has anybody out there ever had an appeal or had to respond to comments on their applications? I'd like to hear some stories.
Don't have any hands raised yet, but we do have a comment. Payment in lieu of fees, PILF agreements can help address tax comments. And then we have a question from Ryan. What is a payment in lieu of fees?
Payment in lieu of fees?
Yes, PILF.
They're usually agreements that tribes make with the local jurisdictions to compensate for tax loss.
Okay.
And Brenda, this is for future tax loss, or?
Yes.
Okay. Got another comment. We've worked with neighboring counties and they have passed resolutions supporting the tribe's trust acquisitions.
That's fantastic.
I know that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's really the way to go. You've got to, work with the local jurisdictions and create the relationship to make them supportive. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's very good. Very good.
I know the county that we're in, being San Diego, the Board of Supervisors lifted their, requirement to oppose all fee to trust applications. And so, what I commented on the beginning is I think there's a change in direction and more support. And so, that's, great news for all of us who have been involved with fee to trust. For those of you who have worked through different administrations, understand how it changes with each administration, and then locally, right? You've got your challenges with your utilities and your local government. So hopefully, this change will continue, and we'll see more successful fee to trust applications moving forward. I know the title companies and issues, I think, will be around for a long time. I think that's why this is such an important topic of title and understanding, because it's a complex subject for sure. So I don't see any hands raised.
Does anybody have any questions about this process here? Once we get to the notice of application, public comment, notice decision, or is this where everybody has a big sigh and says, oh God, we got to this point?
I do have a question that came into me from a fairly new land staffer we have in Indian country. She's wondering, how often might a fee to trust application become stuck during the public comment period? I mean, is there, I think what they're trying to figure out is, what are the examples of a comment from the public that must be addressed that could possibly derail some sort of application?
It's a great question. And I'm going to let Brenda, can you comment on that a little bit? Because I've never really had any, other than the one time regarding economic development and removing something from the tax rolls, but I know there's other comments out there that
Yeah.
everybody's experienced.
Typically, a lot of the comments come in on the environmental work. But we just, on our last talk shop, I think we had one of the New Mexico pueblos was on saying that the BIA is, I mean, they've got some easement issues with the local city or county or somebody, and BIA is making them negotiate them off before they'll actually even do anything with it, which is pretty unusual. I think I've never seen, at least in our region, the BIA making tribes, sort of agree with the cities for easement issues.
Yeah.
Before taking land into trust. But yeah, most of the time, like I said, I mean, we get all kinds of comment letters, and they range from, they're not really a tribe to, you can't put a house up in front of my house because it's going to be, block my view. I mean, there's a lot of range of things, and I think a lot of it depends on your region, but I haven't ever seen one where you haven't, like a comment letter has completely held up an application from being, moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I know they can stall it for quite a long time. I'm
Right.
going to say we had Southern California tribe that the city stalled for quite some time, wanting to understand their whole economic development plan for that parcel, or how it was affecting the neighboring communities. I know one application had a senior citizen community next to it, and I know now they can make a lot of noise, and they can definitely hold up an application. That application was probably held up for, gosh, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe a little longer. And I'd have to go back and look at it again, because it's been a while. But yeah, it was held up. And like I said, some of communities can, you know, cause a lot of problems, but I've never seen it where the BIA has actually removed it and said, no, it's not going to go forward. Eventually they get to that notice of decision in that conveyance document.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a story they want to tell?
Yeah, it looks like we've got one comment. Carlton and St. Louis counties in Minnesota don't fight our applications within the boundaries. Douglas County and City of Superior are transferring to FDL, old cemeteries, and support the land going into trust. And it takes the following amount of time to complete fee to trust at FDL. Fond du Lac, okay, I get that now. Mr. Crone, thank you. 2 to 7 years, 0.4 years with lawyer, 3.3 years at BIA. So Mr. Crone's got that down. He has that data down to the 10th of a year. That's impressive. That's impressive. Now there's a guy that's been doing it for a while. Thank you for that.
Right. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because that was all we had for the PowerPoint. Look at the chat.
Okay. I have another comment. In Arizona, tribal land purchases can be a front for casino development that will destroy a community.
Yeah, that's pretty much a common comment by people all the time. They're really not going to put up houses. They're going to put up a casino.
But there is a separate application process,
right,
for gaming applications. So
yeah, and I mean, it might have been maybe 20 years ago, but I don't know that I've ever seen a true bait and switch where for one thing, if it's off reservation, you can't, you know, BIA won't let you put up a casino anyway, unless you've gone through the process.
All right, another fun fact from Mr. Crone. The longest time FDL held land in fee was 98.43 years. Wow.
Wow. That's how long that fee parcel took to bring into trust? I want to know how that kept moving forward.
Did you have an application in for 98 years?
Wow. Or they just haven't had.
No, we lost track of it. Must be nice to have that much land, huh?
That's funny. That's great.
Very cool. Don't see any hands raised. We're kind of nearing our 90-minute period here. Any last comments or questions from the group?
Yes, that's a good thing too. Mapping all your lands, that is for sure. Be it fee or be it trust, map it all.
Yeah, and Scott is mentioning the Glendale Casino as a bait and switch, and that I think that was part of a land act, like they actually had authority through a land act or something. But yes, I know what you're talking about.
Interesting. All right.
Okay. Well, Mr. Emmons, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I guess I can do that. Well, this has been a really fun presentation and a really fun session because we had so much engagement. Truly phenomenal. Thank you to the three presenters that we had today, Andrew, Karen, and Brenda, as well as all those who commented. You know, we had some really good feedback from everyone in this presentation, and that makes me think that, hey, some of you might be really good presenters for our annual conference. So April 5th through 7th here, Mystic Lake Center in Minnesota, we're having our 11th Tribal Land Staff National Conference. If you're interested in submitting a proposal on some topic that you've worked on, you have all this knowledge and expertise to share about, hit me up. My email address, I'm putting back in here in the chat. That way you could reach out to me if you'd like to present. I'll send you that link. Or if you just want to talk about that, that's fine too.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Karen.
No, I'm sorry. I would just like to send out future sample contracts at sample altas for us to read and review. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, we had really good feedback in today's webinar, so I really appreciate that. To follow up on this conversation, November 2nd, the talk shop is going to focus on FIDA Trust again, specifically, hopefully, some of the things that we talked about today, but it could be something else as well. So land staffers, register for that in the link that I submitted here just a moment ago for the second time. And hopefully we'll see you all November 2nd for that follow-up. So thanks again to everyone who participated in today's webinar.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.